Good day everyone, welcome back. And as promised from my M1A1 review video, we'd be taking a look at where it all began with Tamiya's M1 Abrams kit, the first in their Abrams line. Now as always, we'd be taking a look at the sprues and the parts, and I'd be giving some feedback and comments throughout the review video. Without further ado, let's get started. So the first one we have here would be the upper hull and turret pieces. Upon closer inspection, you could see that Tamiya already has most of the details molded in. Good amount of detailing there, especially for the grills. And if you'd compare it to the A1 upper hull piece, there's not much difference except for the missing X around this part. Now for the turret, there are a few noticeable differences. One would be the blowout panels at the back. For the A1, you would have two big panels here, left and the right, but as you can see, you have three panels right here. Also, for the sponson box, you could see that it would only occupy this area. It's rather small, and the bustle rack goes along this entire width. Also here on the side. Unlike on the A1, where it occupies a good portion of the sides of the turret, but the bustle rack would only occupy this end all the way to the other side. Now, dimensionally speaking, the M1's turret is supposed to be a bit smaller than the A1. Of course, by the time the A1 came rolling about, there were some changes in hardware. That's why they had to change the turret as well. So that's it for these parts. Over here, you'd see a majority of the parts that are included in the kit. First, we take a look at the side skirt. As you can see, not a lot of difference except for the tail piece right here. For the M1, it's angled, but for the A1 and later versions, this part would curve around this end. For the gun, the M1 used the 105mm gun and later replaced with the 120. Here's the entire back panel with the exhaust, the turret for the driver, turret parts for the commander, and as you can see here, this is like the doghouse for the optics. And over here on the gun mantlet, you can see that it's somewhat different to the A1 version, especially this hole right here. If I'm not mistaken, this hole should represent an auxiliary, or if I'm not mistaken, a backup sight. And on the M1, it's a bit elevated. As for the A1, you would find it lower. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the sponson boxes, they're just this small and they go on the sides of the turret. Other than that, there's not much difference between this sprue and also the A1, save for just a few parts like the boxes, the mantlet, and also the bustle rack. As you can see, these are the parts, and all of them just go to the side of the turret. Next up, we have here the parts for the running gear. We have the road wheels, the idler, and the drive sprocket. Coming in closer, you could see a fair amount of detailing on the road wheels and also in the drive sprocket. Not much difference between this and the A1, except for two things. One would be the retainer ring and also these rings right here. All of them go together for the drive sprocket, and that was the first version during the M1's run. But later it was removed and changed when the A1 came rolling about. You can see here the cable, the tow cable that's attached to the side of the turret. And yeah, that's mostly it for these sprues. We have here the lower hull, polycaps, clear parts, screw and nut, and also the tracks. So for the lower hull, you can see some fair amount of detailing. Suspension arms are already molded in place. And again, not much difference from what you'd see on the A1 kit. In this one, we have the polycaps for the road wheels, clear part for the optics, and a screw and nut for securing the gun in place and for elevation and depression. The tracks are fairly good, very little cleanup is needed, and as for assembly, it's the typical Tamiya, or during their early versions where they'd have you melt the excess pins onto the track pads. But what I would do would be to use excuse me, CA glue and just glue it in place and cut off any excess just so that there are no melted plastic on the track pads. So yeah, that's basically it for most of the parts. And then lastly, we have here the manual and the decals. Now, when I got my kit, I found out that the manual it had is the Japanese only version, as you can see. Supposedly, this first part would be multiple languages like English, Japanese, and if I'm not mistaken, German. And going inside, you could see that most of the text is in Japanese. However, since Tamiya does offer very fair illustrations, you could virtually build this as is without really trying to understand most of the words there. And if you do have an A1 manual, you could basically just check that out as reference, and you could see that most of it would be the same. So here you would have an illustration. This would be a woodland version, and this is a winter version, winter camo. Now going around the back, you could see that this one has a three-tone scheme. If I'm not mistaken, this is called the MERDC, MERDC scheme. While this one, this is just olive drab or olive green. And for the decal there, you could see Thunderbolt. There are pictures of this particular Abrams, and supposedly this is the first one that came rolling out of the production lines. Going in closer, you'd have these decals right there. Yukon Jack, Thunderbolt, and then an M1 Abrams decal there, and a lot of other markings. Also the bridge weight indicator. And you have here a small American flag that, let's find it in the instructions. There you go. That small American flag, Tamiya has you or suggests that you stick it to one of the antennas and do it as if it's flying. So yeah, that's basically it for the M1 Abrams. This is a fairly quick review, as most of the parts you would already see in their A1 kit. Of course, we're backdating, so I don't have to mention a lot of parts because most of them you would see in the A1. Of course, as we get to the A2, we would find other parts that are specific for the A2, and that's where I would try to discuss it a little more. But for now, this is it for Tamiya's M1 Abrams, their first of their Abrams product line. Now, as always, if you liked the video, leave a thumbs up, but if you didn't, leave a thumbs down. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of this kit. Have you built it? Have you seen it? Or any comment in general. And as always, keep safe, enjoy modeling, and until next time, goodbye.